Ever wonder why Chinese restaurant fried rice tastes completely different from the one you make at home? Same rice, same eggs, same soy sauce, yet theirs is smoky, dry, and perfectly separated while yours turns soft, greasy, or clumpy. Here's the surprising part. The secret isn't a special ingredient. It's a few small techniques restaurants use, and one of the biggest happens hours before the rice ever touches the wok. Most people try to fix fried rice by adding more soy sauce, more oil, or more heat. That's usually the wrong approach. Restaurant cooks control 5 things differently: the rice, moisture, heat, timing, and order of ingredients. And once you understand these techniques, you can get dramatically closer to that restaurant texture and flavor using the ingredients you already have. So let's start with the step that happens before you even turn on the stove. The mistake that happens before you even cook. Here's an experiment. Take 2 identical batches of rice, same pot, same water, same brand. Cook one and use it hot, straight out of the rice cooker. Cook the other a few hours earlier and let it sit in the fridge. Same eggs, same vegetables, same oil, same seasoning. One of these batches will separate into loose, firm grains in the wok. The other will turn into a soft, sticky mess. Guess which one wins? The problem is moisture. Fresh rice is still full of water, and every grain is soft and slightly sticky right out of the pot. Dump a mountain of hot, wet rice into a pan and the pan's temperature crashes. Instantly, you're not frying anymore. You're steaming. The rice just sits there sweating in its own moisture instead of crisping up. That's the soggy, clumpy fried rice everyone's made at least once, usually while wondering why the recipe didn't work. This is also why chefs don't just grab any leftover rice and call it done. Rice cooled properly and stored loosely stays workable. Rice packed tight into a sealed container, while it's still steaming, turns into a dense gummy brick. You've basically trapped the moisture inside with nowhere to go. Before it goes anywhere near a hot pan, that rice needs to be broken up gently with your hands or a fork, not crushed, just separated enough that every single grain can meet the heat on its own instead of clumping together in the middle of the pan. And while we're here, the rice variety matters too, though not as much as people think. Medium or long grain rice separates more easily than short grain because of how the starches inside behave. But don't go chasing some mythical restaurant rice or assume you need to import a specific brand. A cheap rice cooked with the right technique will beat an expensive rice cooked carelessly every single time. There's a second version of the same mistake, and it's just as common: cooking too much at once. Drop a small amount of cold rice into a screaming hot wok and the pan recovers fast. The heat barely dips before it's back up to temperature. Drop in enough rice for 6 people and the temperature doesn't just dip, it collapses, and it stays collapsed for the rest of the cook. The rice stops frying and starts steaming in its own moisture, and no amount of stirring will fix a pan that's lost its heat. This is the actual reason your fried rice for a crowd never tastes as good as the portion you made for yourself. Smaller batches, cooked one after another. Let the heat come back before you push forward with the next one. Why chefs never touch the stove first? Here's something you'll never see on camera. Because it happens before filming even starts. Every single ingredient is already prepped. Rice broken up and sitting ready in a bowl. Eggs cracked into a cup. Vegetables cut to size. Garlic and ginger minced. Sauce measured out. Nothing is being searched for once the pan is hot, because by the time it's hot, there's no time left to search for anything. Why does this matter so much for a dish that supposedly takes 5 minutes? Because fried rice moves fast, and 30 seconds is an eternity in a hot wok. If your garlic needs 30 seconds and you're still hunting through the cupboard for the soy sauce bottle, the garlic burns, the rice overcooks while you're distracted, and the whole pan turns chaotic in a way it never fully recovers from. A restaurant cook isn't improvising ingredient by ingredient in the moment. They're executing a sequence they already built in their head and on their counter before the heat ever went on. This is also where the equipment conversation usually goes wrong. No, you don't have a commercial burner blasting 20 times the heat of your home stovetop, and no, you're never going to fully copy it, so stop trying. That's not the goal, and chasing it will just leave you frustrated. The goal is a pan that holds enough heat, preheated properly before anything goes in, fed in manageable batches, because a wok's real advantage was never just the flame underneath it. It's the shape, a scorching hot center and cooler sloped sides a cook can shuffle food between, buying themselves a few extra seconds without ever fully stopping the cook. The 30 seconds that decide everything oil isn't just there to stop things sticking. It carries heat into the rice, coats every grain individually, and carries the aroma of everything else in the pan through the whole dish. Too little oil and things stick and scorch in patches. Too much and you get that heavy, glossy restaurant buffet gone wrong texture nobody actually wants to eat. You're aiming for a light, even coating just enough to help everything move freely in the pan, not a puddle sitting at the bottom. Now the part that actually builds the restaurant smell before the rice even goes in: garlic, ginger, and green onion. These aren't garnish, thrown in at the end for color. They're the aroma engine of the entire dish. And timing them well is almost a sensory skill rather than a stopwatch skill. No timer is going to tell you the exact moment. Too early on high heat and they burn bitter within seconds, ruining the oil for everything cooked after. Too late and the fragrance never fully develops, leaving the whole dish tasting flat. You're listening for the sizzle to change pitch as the water in the garlic cooks off, watching the pieces start to move on their own in the oil instead of sitting still. Smelling the exact second it turns from raw and sharp to fragrant and nutty. That's the window, and it's usually under 30 seconds, sometimes closer to 15. Timing isn't a detail, it's the recipe. Eggs are the clearest visual tell between okay fried rice and great fried rice. And there's no single correct method. Some cooks scramble the egg first and set it aside. Others push the rice to one side of the wok and cook the egg directly in the empty space. Both work. What actually matters is the state of the egg by the time it meets the rice. Too early and it dries out into rubbery, overcooked bits scattered through the dish. Mixed in too soon, before it's even set, and it coats the rice like a paste instead of sitting as distinct, soft pieces you can actually see and taste throughout. Protein follows the same logic, just on a bigger scale. Chicken, shrimp, beef, whatever you're using releases moisture as it cooks. Sometimes a surprising amount, and raw protein thrown straight into a small pan with cold rice is exactly how you end up with soggy rice and undercooked meat at the same time, fighting each other for the same limited heat. Restaurant kitchens cook protein separately, or partially separately, specifically so they can control browning without flooding the pan with liquid released mid-cook. Cook it properly and safely first, get some color on it. Combine it with the rice only after. Notice the pattern forming here? Nothing goes into the wok because that's the order in the recipe or that's just how it's always written. Everything goes in based on how fast it cooks and what texture it needs to end up with by the time the dish is finished. It's not the sauce, it's the sequence. If your fried rice doesn't taste like the restaurant version, your instinct is probably add more soy sauce. That instinct is wrong, and it's the single most common mistake home cooks make, almost a reflex at this point. Soy sauce brings saltiness, color, and umami, but drown the rice in it and you get two problems at once. An overpowering, one-note flavor that flattens everything else you work to build, and a wetter pan that steams instead of fries, undoing all the moisture control from earlier. The fix isn't less seasoning, it's better placement. Instead of pouring sauce straight onto a pile of rice and letting it soak in unevenly, chefs hit the hot bare metal of the wok directly, in small controlled amounts, letting the heat flash the sauce into aroma and a slight char before it ever touches the grains. That single move, sauce meets hot metal, not cold rice, changes more about the final flavor than most people expect from something so small. The same more isn't the answer logic applies to misc. It's a flavor enhancer, not a magic Chinese restaurant powder that fixes everything. And dumping in extra won't rescue bad technique underneath it. Used in small, deliberate amounts as part of the overall seasoning, alongside salt and soy sauce, it works quietly in the background. Used as a substitute for good rice in a hot pan, it does nothing. It can't fix moisture, and it can't fix a cold wok. And if you want one finishing move that actually earns its place in the dish, a few drops of something acidic, rice vinegar is the classic choice here, added right at the very end, off the heat or just as it's coming off. Not enough that you'd ever taste sour, just enough to cut through the oil and make everything else taste noticeably brighter and lighter on the tongue. It's a finishing adjustment, not a main flavor, and it's easy to skip entirely if you're not chasing that last 5% of the dish. Control the moisture. Control the dish. Here's the idea that ties almost everything together. So let's say it plainly once. Rice contains moisture, vegetables contain moisture, sauce contains moisture. Meat contains moisture, and the wok can only handle so much liquid in total before it stops frying and quietly starts steaming instead, whether you notice the switch happening or not. That's why a crowded wok, an overloaded batch, wet vegetables dumped in all at once, straight from the cutting board, or sauce poured straight onto the pile all produce the exact same failure through completely different doors. Cut vegetables to a reasonable even size so they cook at the same rate. Give them their own moment in the hot pan, instead of adding them at the same time as everything else, competing for the same heat. Treat the wok like a cooking environment with distinct stages, one thing at a time, not a mixing bowl you dump ingredients into and stir until it looks done. Get this one thing right, just this 1/2 of the mystery of restaurant fried rice disappears immediately, before you've even changed a single ingredient. The smell you can't fake. You've probably heard the term wok hay, sometimes translated as the breath of the wok. It's the smoky roasted aroma that makes restaurant fried rice smell like something is actually happening in the pan, not just sitting in it politely being stirred. It's genuinely difficult to fully replicate at home because commercial burners run far hotter than anything bolted to a home kitchen countertop. But wok hay isn't burnt food wearing a fancier name, and trying to fake it by scorching your rice black is not the move. You'll just end up with bitter, burnt rice, a smoke-filled kitchen, and a very unhappy smoke detector. What you're actually chasing is high heat relative to your own equipment, short cook times measured in minutes, not tens of minutes, small batches that don't overwhelm the pan, and dry ingredients that brown instead of steam. Controlled browning, not charring. That's the real target, and it's achievable even on a normal home stove once the other pieces are in place. Why the best fried rice looks almost too simple. If your fried rice looks glossy and wet with visible pools of oil or sauce sitting at the bottom of the pan, that's not richness. That's a warning sign you skipped a step somewhere earlier. The best version looks almost dry, almost plain, sitting in the pan. Grains moving independently when you shake the wok. A light coating catching the light, not a puddle. And that dish falls apart if you let it sit around even for a few minutes. Fried rice keeps cooking in its own residual heat even after the burner's off completely. Steam keeps moving through it, texture keeps softening, and the fragrance you worked so hard to build over the last 5 minutes starts fading almost immediately, minute by minute. This is also exactly why the final seasoning move, a scatter of fresh green onion, a few drops of aromatic oil, goes in at the very end, not earlier alongside everything else. Some aromas simply don't survive 10 more minutes of heat sitting in a hot pan. Add them late, plate immediately, and the dish arrives at the table smelling like it just left the wok, because it did, seconds ago. The 10-second test before your next batch. Run through this fast, right there at the stove. Is the rice properly cooled and broken up into loose grains? Is everything else prepped and sitting ready before the pan even goes on? Is the pan actually hot, not just warm? Are you cooking a reasonable batch size for your pan, not a mountain meant for 6 people? Are the vegetables cut and controlled, not dumped in wet straight from the sink? Is the order based on cook time for each ingredient, not just habit or how the recipe happened to list things? Is the sauce hitting the hot metal of the pan directly, not drowning the rice in one go? Are fresh aromatics going in at the very end, not the start? And are you serving it the second it's done, not letting it sit while you set the table? Drop a comment with the one you're guilty of. Honestly, almost everyone watching this has at least 2, and a lot of people have 4 or 5. So here's the actual answer to the question this whole video started with. It was never a secret ingredient, no matter how many times you've heard that theory. Write down every single thing a restaurant cook uses in their fried rice, and you'll still be missing the recipe. Because the real recipe was never the ingredient list to begin with. It's the temperature, the order things go in, the amount of each thing, the timing between steps, the moisture in every component, the movement of the pan and the spatula, knowing exactly when to stop cooking and get it onto the plate. Learn that, and it doesn't matter whether you're making chicken fried rice, shrimp fried rice, a fully loaded combination version, or the simplest possible bowl of egg and green onion fried rice. The same principles carry through every single time without exception. The ingredients change from dish to dish, The technique underneath them doesn't. So next time you're standing over a pan wondering why it's not tasting like the restaurant version, don't reach for more soy sauce out of habit. Look at your rice first. Look at your heat. Look at how much liquid just hit that pan in the last 30 seconds. That's where the real answer's been hiding the whole time, not in a bottle, but in the process.